In today's webinar, it's my pleasure to welcome back two guest speakers from Advanced RPO, a leading RPO provider and a gold member of the RPOA since 2015. My guests are Mike Foster, Account Director, and Justin King, Director of Solution Design at Advanced RPO. We will learn how to analyze a talent acquisition program to create strategic advantages using a pragmatic recruitment scorecard. Welcome, Justin and Mike. How about we start with quick introductions?
Sounds great. Thanks, Lamise. As Lamise said, I'm Justin King. I'm the Director of Solution Design here at Advanced RPO. Been in the RPO space for about 13 years now, with the last 6 or so being in solution design, getting to talk with and work with different clients and prospects to understand where they're at currently in their TA program, what issues they have, where they'd like to go, and then figuring out how to get them there. And with me, I have Mike Foster.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So hello, everybody. Again, Mike Foster. I'm an account director with Advanced RPO. I've been in the recruitment industry for a little over 15 years now, of which 11 of them have been in the RPO space, in all sorts of roles from recruitment up into leadership type roles. My role over the last, about 8 years now, as an account director is being the main point of contact for our clients, working with them on designing a best-in-class recruitment process, but also managing the recruitment teams that would support them as well. So acting like a talent acquisition advisor / manager to our clients. So excited to join and ready to get going here, Justin.
All right. So as Lamise had said, today we're going to be looking at a tool that we developed here at Advanced RPO. It's the Recruitment Scorecard. So we're going to first talk about what is the Recruitment Scorecard, and then we're going to pull out a few of the pieces that make up the Recruitment Scorecard and go a little bit deeper in them. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll have some time for questions at the end. But you can see here the 3 topics that we're going to cover in a little more detail are assessing your hiring process, configuration of the ATS, and optimizing job postings. So to kick us off, though, let's talk just a little bit about what the recruitment scorecard actually is. So a lot of times within the RPO industry, Mike and I have the opportunity to talk to different individuals from companies of all different shapes and sizes, all of whom want to talk about recruiting. And through this, we've learned a lot about what the typical issues they face. And one of the biggest things that they face is actually analyzing their recruitment program overall. And what we found is part of the reason why this is so difficult to do is because when you look at something like a recruitment program, there's lots of moving parts. So understanding where to start can be one of the hardest things to do. So what we've done is we've broken down the recruitment process, the recruitment program overall, into 8 different parts. And then within the recruitment scorecard, which is a self-assessment types tool, it's to guide you through looking at what your current state is, assessing where you're at, and identifying key areas where you can make improvements, and then putting it all together to elevate your TA program overall. So as you can see here, 8 different elements we have are ATS configuration, your job postings, sourcing capabilities, compensation, your branding and employer value prop, your job application design, hiring manager training experience, hiring process, and all of those are important, but we're going to hit 3 today. As we go through this, if like I said, if you have questions, please let us know, but we're going to hit some of the high points running through it. And I'm going to first pass it over to Mike to talk a little bit about assessing our hiring process.
I appreciate that, Justin. And this scorecard that we've worked on and we've developed is really turned into a good opportunity for our client bases and even ourselves when we're designing and developing these programs as almost a look at yourself in the mirror type of process. It's not a process where it's, anyone gets in trouble by any means or things like that. It's really just trying to identify where are the gaps or where are the improvement areas to make your talent acquisition process as best as it possibly could be. And it's important to be honest with yourself in that. And sometimes that's a little bit of a change management that we're working with clients where you want to think and believe that processes are perfect and everything is great, But unless you're honest with yourself and really, interested in digging in and reflecting, you're going to have a tough time identifying these types of processes. So I always, kind of launch this scorecard with, be honest, and be fair to yourself, and, we can work through it and help you design and develop, an efficient process. So usually we like to start on the overall hiring process. All the other pieces kind of fall in line, behind the overarching hiring process that fits within this scorecard. And that first bullet point there, really kind of looks at, do you have a standard process for all your roles across your organization? But most importantly, is it documented? Mm-hmm. One of the number one things I tend to see is people do have a recruitment process, but it's not written down. It's not documented, and it's not somewhere that can be easily accessible. Where this becomes a challenge is a lot of times then it's the recruiter that has the process up in their mind and in their head. This creates all sorts of challenges. One, every recruiter may have something a little bit different kind of documented in their head on what that could be. So from a scalability, from an onboarding perspective, it gets very difficult to take what your current recruitment process is today, and really kind of then funnel it out to additional folks and scale it and things like that when it's not purely documented. We always recommend first step, document what it is today, but document it and look at it as a couple different lenses. And when I say that, the recruitment process, as you're evaluating it, looking at it really as what is it like for a candidate? What is it like for a manager? What is it like for human resources who may be touching it? And often forgotten, what is it like for the recruiter that's going through that process? And then as much as you can standardize even your current process before you're making it efficient across all your roles, the easier it'll be to really make sure that you have a process built that's going to be compliant, that's going to go through, and be able to be replicated across your organization. When we're going through a evaluation of this process, a lot of the things that we tend to look at in the process are each step in this process. Is there a purpose tied to it? Is there a decision? Does it follow compliance? Because what we tend to see is there are some recruitment processes that you'll see, and there's steps and areas within it that you start to go, if that's not a decision in the process, then why is it there? If this is causing a bottleneck as your recruiters are going through the process, and it's taking a longer time for them to get through this process, let's look at what those bottlenecks are and discuss, are they really needed? And just as an example, some of the things that we typically see, assessments, references, just to call out too, can be great tools on identifying and helping qualify quality talent through a process. Sometimes you'll look at these and you'll find out that no one's even looking at them. Well, if no one's looking at them and using during the decision process, then why are they there? So kind of just taking a deeper dive and really looking at, are all the steps in this process yielding you the end goal, which your end goal really should be to provide the most efficient and best candidate experience, hiring manager experience, and recruiter experience. And really going through your process today and evaluating it to know what you have to improve. As we start to go through the hiring process part, the second part of it that Justin's going to get into is just as critical, if not almost at the same area here, which is configuring your ATS to align with your hiring process, which Justin will get to here in a second. But if you have a hiring process that you want to follow, and then you have an applicant tracking system that has a completely separate hiring process, there's going to be a lot of different conflicts. It's not going to be a great experience for everybody who's working in it, and it is really important to make sure that there's alignment there. So Justin, I don't know if you want to spend a little bit time getting into the ATS, but I did see a question come through.
Mike, maybe we'll take the questions
Okay.
at the end.
At the end? Yeah, I was clicking. I couldn't find it. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. And like you said, the key really is just making sure that your process is actually going to promote what the end goal is, which is getting the best candidates hired as quickly as possible. And I know you mentioned something around like the references. That's one that we don't see as much, but I recently was talking to a client, and they were saying that part of their process is to have reference checks at the end. And I asked him, I said, well, how often does that knock someone out or change your hiring decision? And she paused for a second, and she said in the last 2 years, she couldn't remember a single time where it had changed anything, but they were taking up to a week to get these completed. And I know that they're losing people at the end of it. Someone else comes in, gives them a better offer. It's just adding more time sometimes. So as a good example, and one that we do see come up quite often. And as we move forward, then, like you talked about, Mike, the ATS configuration. ATS is really the backbone of everything talent acquisition. It is where the rubber meets the road. We can put together all the plans, all the documentation, but we need somewhere to actually conduct the process, and that's where the ATS is. So one of the big things that we look at is this configured to promote what you're actually doing within the business and your process overall? Do you have the steps and statuses that you need to support the hiring process? If you have 3 different interviews with hiring managers as part of your process, do you have interview process 1, 2, and 3 in there so you can actually track people going through? This also promotes compliance as you go through it to make sure that everything is documented, everyone is treated fairly, and they're going through the same process. So anytime that we kick off or implement a new client, this is something that we take a really deep dive and look into, is to see how it's set up currently. If you have a different process for exempt and non-exempt, can you actually complete those processes within the ATS? And what we find a lot of times is that the ATS was put in place and configured without the thought of the actual process, or maybe they didn't have a process at that point. Or as they've gone through, they've added different steps and statuses that make it all cluttered. So those are probably the 2 most common things we see. Either they don't have enough steps and statuses, or they have way too much in there, and it creates a lot of confusion. So as we go through that assessment, we're looking at where we can improve it and where we can sometimes have to bring in another tool, because a lot of times there's manual tasks being completed outside of the ATS. There's spreadsheets that are being kept to keep track of candidates. And Mike, I'm sure you see this from time to time, where that just adds a lot of confusion. And it also, anytime you're doing something manually, you have a lot more chances for mistakes to happen as we go through it. So that's why it's always important, where we can use things and do things within the ATS, we should be. For the most part, most ATSs have the capability of doing a full end-to-end hiring process without any issues. It just comes down to whether or not you set it up in a way to do that. It's also important to look at the capabilities of the ATS and what's included in that. So a lot of times you'll see all the bells and whistles when you go through a demo, but what you actually get might be an abbreviated version based on the version you get. So there's a lot of things to look at the ATS configuration. I have a list of steps and statuses, your dispositioning that we go through. So if anybody's kind of curious about how to elevate, I'd always be happy to talk some more. Mike, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add there to this as well.
Yeah, and as you're looking at the ATS and working with your recruiters, and Justin, you had mentioned the Excel sheet thing that we tend to see quite often. A lot of the Excel sheets stem from a recruiter who doesn't feel comfortable with being able to track a candidate accurately through the system to be able to pull reporting out of that. So then they resort to doing their own Excel sheets. The single-handedly one of the most important things from an ATS, I usually look at is how do we make sure a recruiter in that process doesn't have to leave that system as much as you possibly can. You can keep them in the system and not having to do all sorts of different reporting. It just gets more consistent. It's all housed in one spot. So if you ever, somebody was to leave your organization, it's not sitting in their inbox or on their computer. It's all within the applicant tracking system. Steps and statuses, I can't echo how important that is. A lot of systems, to Justin's point, most applicant tracking systems can handle, a full end-to-end recruitment process. but it's usually up to the business itself to work with the implementation folks when you're buying these systems to set up that process and statuses. And what you tend to see is they may have thought like a new applicant, one interview, and offer extended are just the three statuses that you may need, within an ATS. And unfortunately, if you want to pull reporting for subcycles, how long does it take to get from a hiring manager submittal to an interview? You need multiple steps along the way, and you also need those multiple steps so a recruiter can know exactly where their candidate is in the process, as opposed to a bunch of candidates sitting at one status. So I know Justin has a list of those, and that's kind of one of his specialties. So definitely encourage, if anybody has questions or thought, Justin would be your person to speak to for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And when you were talking about the reporting, that is something we do run into a lot, is companies want to be able to understand what's going on, how to improve. And reporting is one of the best ways to analyze what's going on with your process and where you have room for improvement, especially like you said, being able to track subcycles, making sure that there's a timestamp to know how long it takes to get a candidate from application complete through the interview stage. Lets you, making sure that you have it so that you can tag different hiring managers to a rec or different recruiters to a requisition. So if for some reason we see that one hiring manager consistently has extremely low time to fill, what's different with their recs? What's that recruiter doing? How are we doing that? Or conversely, if we see an issue somewhere, how do we avoid that and dig in to really see? So ATS a lot of time gets glanced over because everybody sees it as just kind of a necessary evil, but there's a lot that can be done to improve your TA program overall just by making sure your ATS is set up. And then I'm going to pass it back over now to you, Mike, on optimizing some job postings.
Yeah, which not to steal your words, but this is something that often gets overlooked as well in a recruitment process. And part of this is the thought process behind job postings has certainly changed over the last 5-8 years, but in particular, I think since COVID, it's really kind of put this onto the forefront. But trying to change the thought process around a job posting isn't just taking a job description that you have and throwing it out on the internet or on monster.com and hoping that it's a results. It's turned into a customer focused play here, which this is a job advertisement. So there's definitely, you have to start thinking of a difference between a job description and a job advertisement. You may have an internal job description, which lists, all sorts of responsibilities, functions, competencies, gets very detailed into what it is. But then you have to look at that and go, okay, how can I optimize this into a job advertisement that's going to get people to want to say, hey, I want to learn more about this job. I want to, click apply. I want to purchase. You're really looking no different than an advertisement to buy some type of product from a store. That's what the consumer is looking for in these postings this day. So some of the things that we typically look at with our clients is that job posting concise and to the point? Again, your internal job description may be extremely detailed, but do you need all that to have a short advertisement on just exactly what this position does and what the qualifications are? Probably don't need all the things. Like you tend to see like lines that say and any other available responsibilities and things like you can remove some of these bullet points that just don't really give the future candidate that much information. So be concise, to the point. The other part of it is again, as a job advertisement, you're selling to that person why they want to work for you. And this starts from the second you post that job, from the second you start branding it out on LinkedIn, different things like that. It's important that you're getting your message out on why you want to work. So we always have, what we call like a job posting optimization template, pretty standard across, as far as the template across most of our clients, but we cater it to each of the clients. But within that, there's usually a section that says, what's in it for you? People in this buyer's market want to know, why should I work here? What's in it for me? And that could be, being transparent and honest around, benefits, PTO, President's Clubs awards, travel, things that you can get. If there's anything in your employee value proposition, which is another part of this scorecard that we won't be getting to today, but as you develop that employee value proposition, getting that out and getting people to understand why they want to work for you and essentially why they want to learn more about this role. But I say that with be honest and transparent in that candidates will sniff out if you're putting job advertisements out there and you're not being honest onto what it is. If your benefits, you don't want to fudge what your benefits are or anything like that. You got to be honest, transparent, and that's what people are really looking for. The other piece of it, and something that we tend to see, not many of our clients do, and we do a lot of this in our market research when developing sourcing strategies and things like that, but is when's the last time you looked at your competitors' postings? And when I say that, you may have a competitor sitting right across the street from you, and you look at that posting and you may even yourself go, well, I would rather apply that job than one on my own company. And that could be for various reasons. Salaries out there now, it's relatively easy to go on an Indeed or a LinkedIn and just see what your competition's advertising from a pay standpoint. If you're right across the street from somebody and you're advertising $4 less an hour in a manufacturing role that's exactly the same, going to be very hard to get people to click apply. If your competitors are offering all sorts of different packages and different things like that, like you want to just really take a look at it and say, hey, how am I comparing financially from a value proposition, but also, from a wording perspective, are they following an optimized template? Are they looking successful in it? You can learn a lot by just a pretty quick search on Indeed and Monster and LinkedIn and things like that, to see what your competition's doing.
Yeah. That's Mike, that's a really good call out there with that, and something that if you've never seen something other than your own job description, you're going to think that yours is good. That's the standard. And so taking a step back and looking what's out there will give you a lot of ideas to understand where you should go with it. And then also to make sure that when you look at your competitors, you're looking at your talent competitors. It doesn't necessarily need to be this person you're competing for customers with. It's who you're competing for candidates with. So if you're in the hourly market and you're hiring production workers, you're not just competing with other factories, you're competing with warehouses, you're competing with fast food, retail, a lot of different places. So you need to kind of broaden your spectrum when you consider who your competitors are when it comes to talent. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there if you had more to go.
That was perfect.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, that is overall gives you an idea of what the recruitment scorecard looks like. As you can see here, each of the 8 sections we have broken out, and we have similar probing questions to ask yourself. And something that we didn't say is there's 3 answers there: no, somewhat, and yes. Mike alluded to it when he talked through it. You have to be honest. If you go through this and say yes on everything, that means that you are at the pinnacle of recruitment capabilities. You cannot get better. And I've yet to meet anyone, whether it be Fortune 500 or small family startup kind of situation, that can truly say yes to all. So if the yeses on this are the least useful answers that you can get, it's when you say no or somewhat is where you're going to find opportunities for improvement. And when you go through the actual scorecard, we give some tips and tricks on how to get started, some support material, and I'm always happy to chat if someone would like to go through and learn a little bit more. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and see if we can open up for questions and let everyone know if you're interested in receiving the full recruitment scorecard, feel free to shoot me an email. It's jking@advancedrpo.com, jking@advancedrpo.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And we do have questions. Justin, maybe, I don't know if you're able to see the chat. If not, you can stop sharing your screen. There were a few good comments and discussion from the audience in the chat. I'm going to pass you the question as well from Aaron earlier about, I really like this question. He says, while assessing the hiring process, how much consideration in your 8 components of the scorecard is given to the candidate experience and to the same argument, how much is given to each of the 8 components? Is there one that gets more the other?
There's always certain pieces of the 8 that are going to speak more depending on the organization. The hiring process, as Mike said, that's kind of the backbone. That's where there's a lot of meat, and that's where you're going to find a lot of the candidate experience side of things. So throughout all of them, you're going to find some. The ATS is going to enable a good candidate experience. The hiring process obviously is going to be very important for that. Your employee value prop and branding, that's candidate experience side of things as well. So throughout all of it, that is important, because at the end of the day, the outcome of a successful hiring process or recruitment program overall is a candidate turning into an employee.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I think every step in this process, you need to give consideration to the candidate experience, followed by the hiring manager experience, followed by the recruiter experience. But the candidate experience kind of leads the way on most of these. When you start getting into employee value propositions and stuff like that, it's really making sure that your candidate has the right experience throughout your entire process to make sure that there is no reason why that candidate's saying no to you by the time they get to the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephen shares a really good observation here about the ATS. So when you talked about the configuration or misconfiguration of the ATS, he says often it's configured by an HRIS team or the IT, and this leads to a mismatch from the actual hiring process. And he said just must have a TA member as part of the implementation team, which doesn't happen often. So is that something that you see as well?
And I would say 95% of the time we see a pretty big mismatch from a system configuration from the hiring process. That's probably where it stems from, to the point where we have plenty of clients and we come in and we give recommendations, and it's, hey, HRIS analyst or the person who owns this is in a different country, based out of France or somewhere, and they own it. And it's hard to even make a status change within the system. So completely get it. That's probably one of the bigger things we tend to see. It is extremely important if you're going into a new ATS to try and influence your business leaders. If HRIS is separate than talent acquisition, to get talent acquisition representation part of that implementation process. And then what I would say is, if you have a talent acquisition leader, but I would also push a recruiter in on that as well. Even as leaders, sometimes we forget what it's like to be the person who is clicking around in that system all the time. If you can have those 2 people join in implementation, the output will be much better. But we tend to see a lot of recruiting wasn't involved in the rollout of this, and that's how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, and I think that's important throughout assessing your TA program, no matter what you're looking at, ATS process, job postings, to get input from others within your organization, and to make sure, like Mike said, that those who have the hand-on experience have a voice in this, because it's going to help improve it even more so, because you're giving them ownership, but you're also getting a viewpoint that you wouldn't typically have from a management perspective.
Very good. And we have some new audience to RPO and some new audience to RPO Association. So what I want to say is both Mike and Justin shared very practical, really good takeaways for TA teams to take and bring to their organization. But I also want to connect the dots and say, for organizations that don't want to do it alone, they don't have to. They can bring recruiting ninjas. We also call them RPOs in the RPO Association, like Advanced RPO. And RPOs help, and Justin and Mikey can also add to this. You can help with all these 8 different components of recruiting, and that depends on the agreement and what you need as an employer and hiring organization.
Yeah, no, that's 100% correct. A lot of times people look at RPO as just handling a process. You find someone, you screen them, you schedule them, and you're done. A good RPO partnership starts at implementation, where you're going to do a full assessment, and that's really where the recruitment scorecard came from. This is what we do at the beginning of an engagement with a client to make sure that they're going to have the best the best program possible. They may not be able to take all of our recommendations, but every movement in the right direction is positive movement. And then also this isn't a one and done thing that you look at. You should always be looking at continuous improvement. So that's something that we definitely do with all of our clients.
Yeah, and I would say from an RPO perspective, there's a mutual interest in getting your process as efficient as possible, and have the best experience as possible. From our perspective, recruitment, it's not easy, and if we can help improve processes, if we can help optimize job postings and make it easier on everybody to hire, it's a win-win for us and yourself as well. So, we look at it as much as we can help out in these 8 different areas. It makes our lives a little bit easier from a recruitment perspective in the end as well.
Very good, sir. We're about the end of our time, but I want to end with a last question to build on the one we just discussed. Is it common to have the RPO provide their own ATS, or are you working with your client's ATS?
We're technology agnostic when it comes to any ATSs. We do have our own internal ATS technology that we can bring to engagements if there is a need for one, or sometimes is useful to integrate our technology with the client ATS to help augment in areas where they may not have capabilities, or if they're unable to change their ATS to mimic a process that is optimized, that we can bring that in.
Excellent. Well, thank you both, and thank you for our audience. That was fun, good engagement, and we were happy to have all of you. The webinar recording will be on the RPOA website, like Justin said, and YouTube channel by tomorrow, usually within 24 hours. We also produce a blog summary and release the webinar as a podcast episode on the Time to Hire podcast, and that should be coming in 2024. We're working and talking about 2024. We are working on an exciting lineup of events for next year. I want to encourage you to check out the RPOA website for more information and to sign up. With that, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Please stay connected, stay engaged, and stay informed of what's happening in the RPO world by tuning into the RPOA, the place to go for RPO. Thank you so much, Mike and Justin. Had fun.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.